Warning: these videos contain the ramblings of a so-called home lab enthusiast. Please proceed with caution. If you choose to stay and watch, some of the side effects may include but are not limited to, what did he just say? To this guy has no clue what he is talking about. You have been warned.
Hi! If you could build a NAS, should you?
If you could build a NAS, should you? Well, that's a great question, Harry, and one that we hope to answer in this video. Welcome to Homebrew Computing, where we talk technology and the fuel that drives us all, coffee. Before we get started, we first wanted to point out there are absolutely no sponsors whatsoever to this video. All the products that we're going to review were purchased by my wife and I. We hope you enjoy the show as much as we did making it. I wanted to first start this video out by giving a shout out to all the guys who have led me to this point. So, NAS Compares, Hardware Haven, Radal, Level 1 Tech, all of you guys have, and Jeff Gearling, even though you don't do a lot with NASs, your Raspberry Pi NAS build here recently was pretty cool. I enjoyed watching that one. How you was able to make that happen. But nonetheless, my hat's off to each and one of you gentlemen out there. You undoubtedly put tons of work into these videos, and it is very exhausting. And I think next time, if this does take off and it does lead to something, because I've enjoyed doing it and I've enjoyed building this NAS, that I'll actually write a script and hopefully stick to it, because I do a lot of rambling. But nonetheless, my hat's off to each and every one of you. You notice in all the videos I've been wearing this Wi-Fi shirt. That's another guy. AJ, God bless, man. You are so awesome. I love your channel. And guys, if you've never watched the Wi-Files, you should go to the Wi-Files, because this week's episode, this man normally rebukes everything. You know, he's always got something. It's either for or against it, or why it's not real, or why it is real. But this week's episode was absolutely mind-boggling that he did not rebuke a single thing he talked about. So if you want a good show to watch on Thursday night, go to the Wi-Files. Host AJ and Hecklefish. You've seen Hecklefish before. Let's pull up. There we go. It's lizard people. It's opposite on the camera. So here we go. Lizard people. So my hat's off to AJ. I absolutely love the Wi-Fi show. So, but nonetheless, let's get to the topic. Should you build a NAS? I don't know. It's a good question. It really all depends on your comfortability level in custom building PCs, because a NAS is really no more than a PC with a bunch of disks. And so put those disks in a RAID, then you got a NAS. So how comfortable are you? I mean, if you've never done it before, probably should stick to a Synology or a QNAP or a TerraMaster or one of the new Ugrains that's coming out. I don't know much about Ugrain yet, but I've seen NAS Compare talk about them several times, and I think Hardware Haven, he talked about them, reviewed them, and they look pretty promising, but they've still got a lot of bugs to work out. But if you're looking for a well-polished, well-oiled machine, you can't go wrong with a Synology, and that's what I hosted in my house. That was my very first network attached storage. And why would I want to get rid of it? It was such an integral part of my network. It was a reverse proxy. Yes, you can do reverse proxy with Synology. It was my Let's Encrypt server, which it secured all of my public-facing services. It was my mail server. It was a Docker server. It was a VM server. And, you know, from the list, it only had a 4-core, 8-thread Atom processor. I was really pushing that Synology to the max of what it could do, and it never once complained, other than I was using non-certified hard drives and the RAM, even though it was said it worked in the Synology. It was error correcting memory. It did not like it at all. I mean, it absolutely balked at me on that part, but as far as performance went, you can't beat it. I mean, Synology is top of the line. Of course, it comes with a price tag. You're not going to get a Synology cheap or a QNAP, but you're not really paying so much for the hardware as you are their software, because it has apps. You could run a Plex server on there. You could run a MB server. MB's not hardly ever talked about. I actually enjoy MB. Jellyfin was another one. that you could host on it. There's just tons of services on there. You can host your own website on it. Good Lord, Synology has just about everything. So I kind of wanted that challenge, and I had a price point set for this project. Kind of went just a little bit over, not too bad. But we'll talk about the parts later on in this video, and you'll see what we built. I'll post the build video, then we'll post the migrations of all the services, each one individually. And I kind of think I successfully did this. So would you join me on this journey? Would you watch these videos with me and critique me? Let me know, hey, you did this wrong. You probably should have approached it this way. But I do want to forewarn you, especially when you get to the Nginx and the reverse proxy side of this. I do have a public-facing IP address, and I don't sit behind a carrier-grade NAT. So if you, in this instance, you may want to follow somebody like Radow or even Hardware Haven. He talks about Cloudflare quite a bit. I'm fortunate I don't have to use that, which I could if I didn't want to expose, I guess, my public IP address, if I'm remembering correctly. I've never dealt with Cloudflare before. I've always just hosted a reverse proxy with Let's Encrypt. So I kept that line the same because that's what I was doing before with my Synology. I didn't veer from that, and each and every one of these videos are in stages, like I said. So from migrating Home Assistant to all the way setting up the reverse proxy and our mail server. It can be done, and like I said, let's get on to the parts.
Hey, we all know a NAS is made of all kinds of things. But if it were made of spare ribs, would you eat them? I know I would. Heck, I'd go back for seconds and polish it off with a nice cold Budweiser.
Well, Harry, I don't ever think a NAS will be made of ribs, but what we're going to do is now we're going to talk about the build and all the parts that we used to make this custom build NAS happen. Okay, so we're going to do a quick rundown of all the products that we purchased for this build. Let's open up Amazon. And yes, we did buy everything from Amazon because we don't have a micro center, which I got to visit while I was in Chicago, hence the hat and the opening for this video. So anyways, let's start it out. We bought the Jonesboro N3. That was reviewed by NAS Compare several times, and I'm sure there's other videos out there. But he talked over this case, gave it real high recommendations. The only thing, and just like him, the only problems I have with it, A, is ventilation, and B, the handles they give you to pull the hard drives in and out with. So let's start with the ventilation. Ventilation, I think they could have done away with the front I/O on it. You really don't need that on a NAS. I personally don't. And again, like I said, this is an opinion of myself, or from myself, and I would have liked to have seen at least a 120 millimeter fan so you could draw air in across the top and pull it across the motherboard and all the components and actually vent them out. But we made it work. There were some mounting places for 2.5 inch hard drives on each side, and we ended up taking a Noctool fan, which you'll see here in just a moment, and mounting those to pull air in across the HBA card, and then one for the processor. So let's move on to the powerhouse of the NAS build. I seen this reviewed by Level 1 Tech and absolutely fell in love with what it could do. So we bought the Minisforum AR900i motherboard. The only downside to this is it is a soldered on processor. So if something happens, you have to buy a whole new board. But looking around for the price, it was $539. You cannot build this combo with a regular motherboard and processor for that price. Not only that, it comes with 4 M.2 slots and a DDR5 support with a PCI 5.0 slot. It's 16 by. So the specs were absolutely unbelievable. The processor so far is an absolute monster virtualization, and because of some stuff that happened, we ended up having to we had to end up using the HBA card instead of the other plan, which I had a video about it. But I was a little bit worried about that because I won't have my P2000 in there for transcoding. But one thing that this does support that helps for the GPU that's built on board is the Intel QuickSync video. So that is great news. I've had up to 4 transcodes going on this guy at one time, and it never skipped a beat. So pretty happy so far with the way it's functioning. So I highly recommend this board. If you're looking for it for a great motherboard CPU combo, you can't even get any better than this. There's no question that this is top of the line. My hat's off to Minisforum. The only thing I do want to hit on this, the only thing that I wish they would change is the cooling heatsink. It is huge, which you need a big heatsink to pull the heat off of the processor, but it does interfere with the real rear cooling on the Jonesboro case. So I had to point the fan to where it was pulling cool air in and blowing it out across the back of the heatsink. As you can see right here, there are ventilation holes for that, and it is fine. It is holding its temperatures the way it should. We didn't overclock this system because there's really no need to. This is a NAS. This is not a gaming PC. So next on the list is the RAM. We bought some Crucial 64 gigabyte DDR5 4800 MTs. That's mega transfers per second. And the only regret is I wished I had maxed the board out at 96. And that would have given me a little bit more headroom for virtualization. But you know, we really didn't have that many VMs as we used to. We kind of consolidated down, got rid of all the ones we don't use anymore. So we're sitting about 31, 32 gigabytes for the ZFS system, and then the rest is over to the main part of the OS and virtualization. So it's okay. If we ever have a need to bump up to 96, maybe we will, but I think we're going to be okay at 64 gigabytes. But I do recommend go ahead and maxing the board out. So the OS is sitting on the Western Digital 250 gigabyte M.2 drive. The VMs are sitting on the Crucial. I bought 2 of those, and they're both mirrored. That way, if one of them fails, I don't have any problem losing my VMs. And then we're using a Kingston for the caching. The reason why I probably would have bought another Western Digital, but the caching part was kind of secondary. We wanted to see if it actually worked, and it does work. I have a video showing how quick it transfers from the hard drives to the fast storage. It is quite remarkable. Once it learns the most used files, it really does make a difference. So it took a couple of times of moving it back and forth, and it finally stored it in cache, and then I mean it was almost instantaneous moving 21 gigs of files with an internal. That is internal moving. That's not across the network. So this is the part where we come to that we had some issues. I read an article on Reddit that said that the motherboard did support bifurcation of the PCI lanes. I never could find it. I may have overlooked it because I was quite frustrated at the time that nothing was booting up. So we ended up pulling them out and moving everything to the HBA card, which caused us to lose our NVIDIA card that we were going to use in the build. But that's okay. The HBA card, even though this is not a name brand, is holding its own. But there's one kicker to the HBA cards. You always want to make sure you get ones in IT mode, and that will work. We're only using 8 lanes of the 16 lanes available to the PCIe slot on that motherboard, and we are getting the 6 gigs that the card does offer. We've got, like I said, you'll see some copying moving from the fast storage to the storage itself, and see how it does move along about 400 to 500 megabytes per second. This one is going to blow your mind, and I'm probably stupid for doing this, but we'll see how it turns out. We were trying to keep this under a certain price point, and this is what I sold my wife on. And I found these renewed hard drives on Amazon, and yes, I'm absolutely scared to death, but we're going to take a chance. They're $89 a piece. They're a Western Digital HGST enterprise grade hard drive, and they're not too loud. You really can't hear them, to be honest with you, for being an enterprise grade drive. And no, I'm not going to format my Synology and start all over. We're going to keep that safe and sound. It's going to hold all of my data from that we moved off of it to this, and hopefully they will never crash. But if they do, if something was to happen, a catastrophic failure on more than one drive, then we have a backup with the Synology. So let's move on. What powers this guy? So we started off with a Cool Master, you'll see that, and then we had to end up swapping this Corsair because the Cool Master ended up having a bad rail on it, and I wasn't going to take a chance, even though it was a highly reviewed power supply in the SFX model. The one mistake I did make, and you'll see in the build video, was it was too long. And what in the world? And I looked at the model, and what I didn't realize was this had an L out beside it. So there's two different SFX power supplies. There's a short version and then there's a long version, and it is quite a bit longer. And then it ended up interfering with the front I/O, and we had to end up removing that. I probably could have cut the PCB board that everything was mounted to, and then the just like Level 1 Tech said, there's no place to hook up a front I/O for a USB 3.0 on that board. So I probably could have took a Dremel and cut that PCB board down to size and made it all fit in, and I still would have had the USB 3.0 and the sound on the front, but I don't need it all, so we just left it out. And to help pull in cool air, we talked about we mounted some fans on the side. It's not perfect. I don't like it. It's kind of jerry-rigged in. But we use these two 80mm Noctil fans to help pull in some cool air across the HBA card and the processor, so to help keep the system nice and cool across the top. That goes to my whole point. Do you really need front I/O on your NAS? You know, unless you're going in and plugging in a USB and doing it as a pass-through, then I would say no. But if you are, you can always just plug it in around back. You know, try to keep it accessible. But nonetheless, I would have really enjoyed seeing a 120mm fan on the front of that Jonesboro case to actually pull cool air in, along with the fans that's in the rear that pull cool air across the hard drives. And they do really pull, because I was doing an experiment with the NAS, and I had the 220mm fans that are on the back laying down on the rack, and the hard drives really did start gaining some temperature on them. So I put it back in and screwed it, because you could feel the sides of the case getting warm. So those two fans really do pull a lot of air across them and help keep the hard drives cool. And the last piece was the motherboard had a 2.5 gig networking card, and kind of wanted to take advantage of it, and we watched the video, and this transceiver says it supports 1, 2.5, 5, and 10, but the only catch is I don't know if the Unify actually is supporting it correctly, because it says it's 10 on the Unify Dream Machine and 2.5 on the True NAS side of it. So we bought it, but we're still keeping it in. I'm getting 1 gig from this PC to it, but I really don't have any way to actually do an iPerf test to see if we're getting really 2.5 gigs to it. So that is it on everything that we bought, and kind of a quick review. We will post all the videos about every step that we took, and that is it, guys. We will see you in the next video.
Well, Joe, it's been a pleasure. That's all the time we have. See you next time. Come win! Come win!